internet, my name is Lave, and this week I watched T2 or Trainspotting 2. Now I was really nervous going into this film because I'm a huge fan of the original Trainspotting, which came out in 1996. I didn't actually get to see this in the cinema because I was 13 and obviously because it's rated 18. But I do remember watching this film when it was on VHS, talking with my mate who I went to see this with tonight. He said, "Oh, do you remember you could buy it in the orange sleeve jacket or in the green sleeve jacket?" I was like, "Oh yeah." Yeah, this film was just so influential for me. Definitely one of the best British films of that year, maybe even in the decade, maybe even ever. And I have to admit, being that it's been 20 years, I thought, was it really necessary for a sequel? But there was no way I wasn't going to go and see what all of the guys from this film are up to now. And before I carry on with this review, bear in mind there may be some spoilers for Trainspotting. If you haven't seen Trainspotting, you should definitely go and see it. And I don't think you should see T2 without seeing this first. Yes, absolutely watch this first. So Trainspotting 2 is set 20 years after the events of the last film. Mark Renton comes back to Edinburgh after betraying his mates and stealing their money from a skag deal. Yeah, Renton's a little older. I wouldn't say he's any wiser. In fact, I'd say he's still a loser. And to be honest, his mates are still losers as well. Spud, well, he's Spud. I always thought of him as the innocent party. I always thought that he was a junkie just because Sick Boy and Renton, his mates, were junkies. And he actually has a really good monologue which explains where he's at and where he's been. And I really liked the reintroduction to Sick Boy as well. He's still scamming wherever he can. He's involved in this blackmailing scheme with his new girlfriend Veronica. And he's also running this pub in the middle of nowhere. He's growing weed out of the basement. He gets no customers. And in fact, it's the pub which sort of gets involved in their plans for the future. Now, I'm not going to give any spoilers away. And then, of course, you've got Begbie, who we first find in prison, but then he gets out. And it's really about them trying to avoid the confrontation between Begbie and Renton. It's pretty funny when they eventually do meet. It was hysterical and still pretty scary. Robert Carlyle is still a scary motherfucker. He'd give Joe Pesci a run for his money. So really the first hour of this film is catching up with all the guys. You get a lot more development this time around with the guys. Not only are you catching up with where they are now, but you're also catching up with them in the past. And they do reference Trainspotting a lot, and they do use a lot of footage which I think did work, but you also get to see them way younger as well. You get to see Renton and Sick Boy getting their first shot of heroin, and they also explain why Begbie knows these lot despite the age difference. And out of all of the characters, it was really Spud's arc which had the emotional weight to it that really surprised me. I never really thought about it, but when he sees Renton again for the first time, he actually blames him for ruining his life. And Renton's like, "I left you $4,000. And he's like, "You left me $4,000 and I was a junkie. What do you think was going to happen?" I was like, yeah, never thought of it like that. So as well as the cast all returning, the biggest draw for me was the fact that Danny Boyle was back. I absolutely love Danny Boyle as a director. I just love his creativity and the fact that he's such a champion of film and other medias as well. And he does bring his visual flair back with him. I think he does some interesting things with the camera, and I really liked his colour palette, although it is different to Trainspotting. It doesn't feel as grimy. It feels a lot cleaner. Perhaps that's because they aren't all heroin addicts now, but it all felt a bit pristine for me. And he does do this weird thing on a couple of occasions in this where he will just hold a frame for just a fraction of a second longer so that it feels like there is a pause in it. Yeah, I wasn't too keen on that, but overall I will say that aesthetically this is a really good looking film. And as much as things are the same, there are differences as well. There isn't any narration from Renton this time around, although he does have a killer monologue when he talks about the origins of why he said choose life. Yeah, I thought it was going to be really cheesy at first, but he absolutely nails it. And also this time around it avoids sort of the surreal moments that you got from Trainspotting 1. Now again, that could be because they're not really hooked on heroin anymore, but I do think it lost a little bit because of that, but it is very funny in certain spots. I did find myself laughing quite a lot. And another thing that the first Trainspotting is famous for is having a killer soundtrack. Now, this one has got a good soundtrack, but it isn't as iconic as the original. The music in that is sort of synonymous with it. You do get some really good new songs, but it also remixes some of the old ones like Lust for Life and Underworld's Born Slippy, which is all great, but it just wasn't amazing. And that's really how I feel about the film. It's okay, it's fine, and I'm not sure if I'm okay with that, but then I'm not sure what I was expecting. The first one is so iconic. It was an impossible thing to make another one as iconic. Maybe it is because everyone has just moved on and got older. The film does sort of talk about it. There is one really good line when Sick Boy says, "You're just a tourist in your own youth." I thought that was a great line, but overall I can't help but feel just a little bit disappointed. I was expecting more, so maybe when you go to see this, maybe you should lower your expectations. So that's my thoughts on T2 Trainspotting, and pause the video if you want to take a closer look at my enjoyment tracker now. I know they've been talking about making this film for years, and I always thought, was it necessary? And to be honest, now that I've seen the sequel, I still think that it wasn't really necessary, but I can't say that it's a bad film. It just isn't amazing like the first one was. Maybe it does rely on nostalgia a little bit too much, and I do wonder how this film is going to perform, particularly with the youth of today. But there definitely are moments to enjoy, and I did really like the way it ends. It sort of goes a bit meta. That's all I'm going to say because I don't want to spoil it. But I definitely don't think that this film ruined the legacy of the first one. The first one is always going to be there. I'm always going to have that. I don't want to see a Trainspotting 3. So thanks very much for watching my review of Trainspotting. Have you seen it? Have you seen the original? How did it compare for you? I'm really interested to find out, particularly if you're of my generation. Tell me what you thought about it. So thanks again for watching. If you can, give this video a like, and don't forget to share the Lave. Lust for Life. Subscribe.